Hi there, and welcome back to the second in a series of installments on our latest webinar around basically looking at different demographic groups within our community and thinking about things around understanding, engaging, and empowering those groups. This particular installment is entitled Youth in Apprenticeship and Career and Understanding, Engaging, and Empowering Youth. I am Kimberly Harris, and I'm with the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub. And I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Corey DiBiase, and we are really excited to have this conversation with you. And so, without further ado, we want to go ahead and give you a little bit of a rundown around what you can expect in this particular installment. If you did tune in to the introduction or the introductory installment that we have that is out for you to consume, we talked about the fact that we will have in this particular webinar series statistics and characteristics describing various demographic groups and how that then informs how we not should treat them, but should just be thinking about some of those larger kind of overarching factoids, if you will, and how that may inform folks within the workforce who fall into these categories as a group. We never want to generalize. We never want to operate off of, stats. We want to interact with people, but it's also great to know and have a little bit of information as a starting point to get to know individuals, right? So we are definitely not saying that this is something to do in lieu of the respect and the importance of getting to know individuals, but it's a helpful thing. So it's definitely not that. It is a helpful tool to help us understand various groups within our workforce and some of the things that may tether or group folks together as a generation, as we'll be talking about the youth here, or from a gender standpoint, or from, let's say, some other status like being a veteran or something else. But we know, we all know that individuals are complex, that everything is contextual, and there are no shortcuts to getting to know people and human interaction. So we're going to do a little in all of these series, in all of the installments in this series, if you will, we will have some stats and characteristics. We'll also have a focus talking about the value proposition that comes from intentional outreach and recruitment. We'll talk about engagement, empowerment, and then always, as we do in these installments, we'll talk about the importance of evaluation as part of those efforts. And we know that for us, evaluation is the thing that tethers the outcomes that we want to see to the processes that we employ. So getting going, speaking of this from a generational standpoint, as we were crafting this slide deck, this, if you are of a certain generation, you probably may recognize We're the Kids in America as a song that was all the rage in the 80s. And we were just used that as a pun, but just also as another example to lift up how phenomena, events, culture, all the things can have a generational thumbprint on them. So as we think about what it is to understand Gen Zers and Gen Alpha, we just wanted to just have a little bit of a license to do just that. So in thinking about who are the youth in the workforce, we typically think about Gen Zers as being folks who are born between the years of 1997 and 2009. However, what we're coming to know and understand is that demographers have begun to tease out and stratify this large group into two generational categories based on the social trends and the shared experiences that distinguish them one from another. So when we tease out these two categories, we have the Gen Zers that we typically think about, but we also have this generation that we call the Gen Alpha, which are folks who are born between 2010 and 2024. And this is the cohort, the Gen Alpha cohort, that immediately follows the Gen Zers, and they are set apart by the fact that they were all born in the 21st century. That has lots of implications around their comfort with how quickly technology can become obsolete, and how new technologies can be embraced and incorporated into day-to-day life. We think about, compared to Gen Zers, who make up around almost half, around 46% of the population under 29. The Alpha generation is about 54% of of that total population. So we're going to focus primarily on the Gen Zers because still compared to the Alpha generation, when we think of youth in the workforce, there are more of them. But it is so important to know that we have this generation of the Alpha generation who are in the workforce and will become a larger part of the workforce in the years to come. So with that in mind, just thinking about this, the fact that we're looking here at a graphic that breaks down and shows us just the proportion of Gen Zers by age group in the nation. Gen Zers represent the newest and youngest generation of labor participants, or at least they were. The Alpha generation is slowly creeping into that view. But Gen Zers right now, as we said before, they're not outpaced by the Gen Alphas. The Alphas are coming into the workforce, but just where they fall in terms of age, not a big proportion right now. Gen Z is projected to make up Gen Z. It's projected to make up almost three quarters, around 74% of the global workforce. It's important to keep that in mind by 2030. So we know that there is a large swath of working individuals who fall into that category globally. And similarly, within the US, there is a really big chunk, a sizable proportion of folks who are also in that category. Now, as we look at the numbers and look at the stats on Gen Z, according to a study that was done by Deloitte in 2025, Gen Zers characteristically have a low prioritization on leadership. Only 6% of Gen Zers indicate that that their primary career goal is to reach a leadership position. They have a high prioritization on skill building and on ongoing relevant training. For them, for Gen Zers, learning and development are among the top three reasons why they chose their current career choices. And additionally, 70% report that developing skills to advance their careers at least once a week is something that they consider to be very important. Gen Zers are also considered to be job hoppers. Nearly a third of them, or roughly around 31%, plan to switch employers within the next 2 years. And this reflects this tendency to move from job to job in search of, in quest of, a better, more stable, more conducive overall career. And it also points to a place of their desire for work-life balance. Many Gen Zers report having concerns about education. Around 31% of Gen Zers and 32% of millennials have decided not to pursue higher education, primarily because many of them feel that the cost benefit is a little bit out of whack. They report being a little bit skeptical, and they feel that the return on investment is not as high as they feel that it should be. And many Gen Zers also report a desire for meaningful work. More than half, around 54% of Gen Zers say that finding meaningful work is very important. And they also feel that the type of employer, so it's the work that they're doing and who they're doing that work with. They find both of those things to be extremely important. So in terms of what Gen Zers are seeking, Gen Zers are actively engaged in various activities and trends that reflect their values and their priorities. They really value and really they put a premium on work-life balance. They also value learning and development. And we've talked also about their skepticism around higher education. There's also this financial insecurity. There's a prevalent sense among Gen Zers that financial insecurity is a reality. They nearly half of Gen Zers report feeling financially unstable, and many of them feel as if they are living from paycheck to paycheck. which is a reality, right? So with that knowledge, how can one be responsive to that? Also, among Gen Zers, there's a concern about the environment. Gen Zers are highly focused on environmental issues, and many of the Gen Zers report that they are willing to pay more for sustainable products and actively research companies' positions and stance on environmental practices before they even make employment decisions. Job mobility is another thing that's a reality for Gen Zers. They are prone to job hopping. They prioritize work-life balance, and they really want to work with organizations that get it. They also are a active member of what we call the gig economy. Side jobs are not alien or unknown to Gen Zers. They take on side jobs, side hustles, gig jobs, if you will, to ensure that they can round out their finances and bring a little bit more stability into their day to day. So then as we think about, the stats on Gen Alphas, in comparison, they are, as I said before, the youngest generation, and they are the largest generation ever. Gen Alphas were born into tech and they have been socialized on tech. They're not afraid of it. They are okay. They've totally understand and are aware that tech gets old quickly. So our obsolescence does not give them anxiety. They are embracers of new tech. They are fast integrators of technology into their day to day. They are expected to represent approximately of around 11% of the global workforce right now. And then as we think about more characteristics of Gen Alphas, remote learning is something that is a reality for Gen Alphas. Some of the Gen Alphas who are in the workforce we have to think about were either had siblings or themselves were on the tail end of the total remote learning as a result of the global pandemic. So this is a generation of workers who have a comfort with independent learning, who are also very comfortable in creating a distal community, right? Because they know and recognize the fact that for them, the world is flat. Their bestie or whomever could just be a click or two away. So they have embraced that because that is part of how they came into maturation with some of the realities that impacted us all during things like the global pandemic. And so, in terms of the value proposition of focusing on youth, what do they bring to that table? We're talking about we have to be mindful of the fact that we have that's access to a pipeline of future talent, the fresh perspectives and the innovation and their comfort with technology and how quickly it turns over is something that we should recognize. And we don't even know all of the ways in which we can seize and tap into that as a value proposition. But it is indeed a value proposition because what it means is that when we think competitively and we think about innovation, R&D, that alpha generation is a generation of consumers, of workers who embrace that, they embody that. So understanding them and understanding their pathway into the workforce and all of the things that shape them developmentally, or some of the things that shape them developmentally as a generation, is so critical to being able to tap into some of the richness that they bring and how that then has implications for being competitive and for growing and moving along our respective or your respective companies and or organizations rather. So it's really important to understand and appreciate that value proposition that all of this workforce brings, and particularly that emerging Gen Alpha workforce. So, in terms of recommendations for employers, to attract and retain Gen Zers, organizations should create supportive environments that prioritize learning and development. They should be ready and poised to address financial security and mental health concerns that we hear Gen Zers, and we will probably hear Gen Alpha talk about as well as more of them enter into the workforce. Employers should also be able to and be ready to foster an environment of meaningful work and incorporate responsibility towards sustainability, because sustainability is something that we know per the research matters for Gen Zers and will probably matter just as much, if not more, for the Alpha generation as well. In referencing that Deloitte 2025 study, it underscores the need for businesses to also adapt to the evolving expectations of the younger generations and to maintain a satisfied and engaged workforce, and appreciate the fact that as the workforce gets even younger or grows from the introduction of more and more Gen Alpha into it, that we have a workforce of globally minded, globally conscious workers who really feel as if the world is only a click away. And how do we recognize, honor, and leverage that in the day-to-day operations is something that should be top of mind for organizations looking to employ and be viable and maintain going concern. And with that, I will hand it off to Corey to talk about engaging youth.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As always, today we're very excited to be here and be talking about all this good stuff. So, as we talked about, and just building on this foundation that Dr. Harris has laid out for us here, we want to begin by talking about what are some of the specific practices, what are some of the, it almost say, and hopefully it'll be clear what I mean by this as we start talking about this. What's the mindset with which we, as the folks on the professional side, the registered apprenticeship side, the career development side, the educational side, whatever it is, how are we fostering real connection and engagement? What is the mindset that we're bringing to these interactions that's going to begin the process of establishing these relationships? So we can just keep going right here. And the way we would like to do this for these sessions is to kind of look at this through the filter, through the lens of thinking about an individual, clearly an individual within this range of folks that we think of as Gen Z. So let's meet Aaron right now. Aaron is 22 years old. He's easily distracted by most of our standards. We feel like his eyes are constantly darting. He's constantly moving from task to task, focus to focus. And he doesn't seem to like eye contact because he's not making eye contact with supervisors, colleagues, other folks like that. Not being rude, just not making me notice a lack of eye contact. When he's either bored or pressured, on either side of that kind of pressure spectrum of not enough or too much, his comfort move is to look down at his phone. That clearly becomes this space where he feels much more comfortable. One thing that we've noticed as we work with him and we work on doing our goal setting and all those pieces, he struggles to set longer term goals. Even when presented with with concrete options, it's very difficult for him to kind of chart a path forward and to, as we talked about in the last session, to keep those reins, to keep control of this process in his hands. He doesn't necessarily want to do that. He doesn't want to take the reins and say, this is where I want to be 6 months from now. This is where I want to be a month from now. Here are the steps we need to take to get there. When we get to that moment of decision of goal setting, we just never seem to arrive at a kind of a concrete option. So here are the things that we know about Aaron thus far, right? So what are some of the possible, and this is not, by the way, that was all that stuff in that last slide. That's stuff we know. That's biography. That's information. That's data. Now we're into speculation. Now this is where we're getting into that mindset thing I was talking about just a minute ago. So these are Aaron's possible challenges, possible things. Again, we are speculating here about Aaron. Could be one way of looking at this. Maybe we say, Aaron's uncomfortable in this professional environment. This is new to him, right? This is not something he's done before. And so he's indecisive and he's he's perhaps a little socially awkward. And he's a little bit retreating in the sense of looking down at his phone when he's under pressure, not making eye contact. Maybe it's just as simple as a lack of experience, and it's just that straightforward. Okay, that's one possibility. Possibility number two: Aaron may exhibit a lack of comfort with and connection to you and others due to the demeanor or the identity or the experience of other folks around him. I had a colleague, actually, amusingly, but this is not the basis of this, a young gentleman named Aaron, younger than myself when he was reporting to me on a project that we worked on. And for the longest time, I was really struggling with trying to kind of feel like I had a connection to this young man, and to feel like, okay, we've gone past here's an assignment, yes, it's done, now some feedback too. Okay, we actually have a relationship, not we're best buddies, just we have a connection here. Struggle with that a little while. Turns out after 6 months of working with this guy, and this is not relevant really, but it turns out that it was, I'm a huge Eagles fan, and I don't tend to stop talking about the Eagles, particularly we're recording this just at the end of July, which of course is practically football season already in the minds of people like myself. So I was probably just talking about, oh, the game, this, that, the other thing, oh, this was terrible, that the refs are this or that, the other thing. And just that fact, as it turns out, he used to work concessions at the Eagles Stadium, and thus, as a consequence, did not have the best impression of Eagles fans, particularly when he was working that adult beverage concession stand. Perhaps he thought that some of us didn't comport ourselves with all the professionalism we could, right? Well, I didn't know that about Aaron's experience, but it genuinely made him a little hesitant around me, thinking like, okay, when is this guy gonna start really acting like an Eagles fan here in the office? Of course, I tend not to in the office, but anyway, it could be any of these things. And there could be all kinds of other features, all kinds of other identity features about myself, or just my demeanor. As I've said, I'm sure folks have seen me talk about other things here, and this relates also to trauma and considerations like that. I'm a big guy. I have a big voice. I have big gestures. Now, I tone that down when I'm talking one-on-one. This is not how I have a conversation with someone, right? But still, that can, I know, make folks uncomfortable. And there's only so much I can do to change that. I can tone it down. I can't be shorter, right? I can't be a smaller dude. Well, I could, but let's not talk about that. All the point here being that based on who we are, there might be a mismatch. And do we need to find a way around that? Yes. Is that anybody's fault? No, of course not. But we just need to be considering it as we think about what might be preventing this connection with Aaron. Moving on with this, Aaron may have difficulty with future planning and building trust connections with others due to the presence of trauma from a prior experience in homelessness, or a prior experience as a military member, or prior experience in, trauma can come from all kinds of different places, as we well know. Now, again, this is just another hypothetical here. This is just another possibility. So we don't even need to think specifically about homelessness if we don't know that to be a part of someone's past. But again, we don't need to, someone doesn't need to be a veteran or have experienced homelessness or have experienced incarceration to have experienced trauma. So who knows, maybe that is a factor that we need to consider. Finally, Aaron may have a lack of focus due to substance use, leading to ambivalence about future goals and changes and any kind of changes in habits or routines. Again, we don't know. This is all speculation. And by the way, I understand it's a little more weighted when we start. If I'm a supervisor and I start speculating about substance use, those kinds of things, well, that we know that we need to be careful about that. We need to proceed cautiously thinking about that. We don't just kind of bandy those ideas around. But again, just our mindset, our thinking, all of these possibilities are on the table, right? We do not know the answer yet at all. These are just four other, and I'm sure there are other possibilities that we could throw out here that could explain where Aaron is coming from. So what are we going to do? How are we going to respond to this situation? Again, and a reminder, we had our facts. With that first pane was all the stuff we know. We've observed Aaron's behavior. All that second pane, that's all speculation. We don't know anything yet. But let's see, what can we do here? We can spend time building rapport by discussing things Aaron enjoys. Now, we should be able, even with folks who are very, very standoffish, in time, we should have a sense of what is someone like, what is someone interested in, what is someone motivated by. Let's focus on those things. Get talking about those things. Is that going to be talking about the Dallas Cowboys in a positive way? Well, maybe, and if, as a supervisor, that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to find a way to say what is going to be the right connective point here, even if we have to make that monumental sacrifice that I just discussed in talking about the Cowboys in a good way, right? That's huge, huge, huge sacrifice I'm making. Kidding, obviously. We could do other things here. We can introduce Aaron to other staff to determine if he's more drawn to others. Do we find that, like, wow, I introduced Aaron to Kim, and Aaron and Kim are, they're like best friends 5 minutes in, whereas I'm still struggling to build a relationship with Aaron. Okay, we know that at least part of the factor here is that I'm not Aaron's cup of tea. And again, that's not the end of the world. That's not a problem. It's just, it's not anyone's fault, and it's not inseparable. It's just something we need to think about, consider, and figure out. Maybe we can spend some time visiting other registered apprenticeship or job sites, other employers, other settings. Maybe Aaron just doesn't like this stuffy office that we're in, or this manufacturing floor. Maybe we need to go to his favorite coffee shop and have our next meeting. Maybe we need to go out for lunch, something like that, just to build this kind of connection. Maybe we encourage Aaron to pick the location of our next meeting. Maybe I've been doing the thing where I say, okay, Aaron, meet me in my office, or meet me here where I'm very comfortable. Maybe we find when Aaron says, actually, could we go outside, sit at the picnic table behind the office? That's just so much nicer. Maybe that leads us somewhere. This also, by the way, like, what am I doing when I'm asking Aaron to make this kind of choice? Well, first of all, I'm cultivating self-direction, right? I'm giving him the keys, and I'm telling him, all right, Aaron, you tell me now, is this a huge choice? Where are we going to sit down and have this meeting? Of course not. Doesn't matter. We're putting the keys in Aaron's hands. Um, and by the way, that sense of control, and that control, particularly over environment, maybe that gives Aaron the chance to address, even if he doesn't realize he's doing it. Maybe that's going to have Aaron go to a place that he feels more comfortable, he feels more safe, whereas maybe he didn't feel safe in these other settings before in the same way. At the very least, it's going to tell us. Okay, it's going to tell us a little more about what is Aaron like here. Maybe I've been inviting. Maybe I think it's great to sit outside and get some fresh air during the day, but maybe Aaron hates the mosquitoes and that kind of stuff. So maybe I've been inviting him to the picnic tables, and he's like, "Can we please just meet in a cubicle with some fluorescent lighting and AC, please? Because this outside stuff is not my thing." Who knows? Again, what we're doing here is kind of forcing the reins back into Aaron's hands, but giving him the opportunity to define these things for himself, and as a consequence, to define them for us. So other possible responses here, without pressing, again, we want to exert, we want to be there, we want to lean in, as Kim was saying before, to quote that phrase, but we're not looking to apply pressure. That's not how we build relationships, right? But we want to really continue to push Aaron to some extent to lean in on this question of what motivates him at the most basic level. Why does he get up in the morning? Why does he want to go to work? What is he earning money for? Or is it really not as much about the money? It's about, he has this vision of where he wants to be, or maybe a job's a job to Aaron, but he has something in his life that he wants to achieve that he knows, as most of us do, he needs to have a job to achieve that. Who knows? In motivational interviewing, as we talked about, this focuses on these core motivators. This is an idea that we can begin to say, okay, what is it what is the real engine that is pushing Aaron forward? And how do we think about that and think in those terms to ensure that we are being part of that momentum, right? And that, of course, that motivational interviewing, that when we talk about some barriers that Aaron might not feel comfortable discussing or addressing, well, when we focus on that core motivation, that's when we have the opportunity again to say, okay, what are some challenges that are causing barriers? What are even behaviors, Aaron, that you're putting forward here that might be causing some barriers for you? That by focusing on the big goal, by focusing on the long term, by keeping your eyes on the prize, as they say, we're going to be able to address these other issues more clearly, because now we've got a sense of focus and forward direction. maybe we're going to connect Aaron to a mentor. It was only going to take us so long to talk about that, right? When in doubt, mentorship. We love it. We always recommend it. But clearly, and again, thinking about the kinds of folks that Aaron might feel most comfortable with, we would connect him with someone that he felt that connection to. Now, that might be a younger mentor who feels like who Aaron's going to feel like, okay, this is more my peer than someone who immediately thought like, yeah, the kids in America, of course I recognize that song. Well, the funny thing is when you recognize that song really readily, that means you're probably not one of the kids in America anymore. And Kim was too kind to say that, but sadly, bearer of bad news, and it applies to me as well, right? But we know we're not in that group. So maybe we hook Aaron up with someone who can provide that leadership in that direction and can model proper behavior in the workplace. But he or she, this mentor is also able to better connect with Aaron. Or, by the way, it could also be maybe we get someone who in the office who's very close to retirement, but who for some other reason has a stronger connection to Aaron here. This is all when we're talking about relationships. We know there's no science here that we can apply. We need to proceed as best we can, right? And then finally, we can connect Aaron with peers that currently participate in your program. Again, thinking in this case, probably younger folks who can say, yeah, this is what you've got to do to succeed here. These are the benefits. This is what it's like. And maybe help Aaron decide that it's the right choice for him, or help Aaron decide that it's not the right choice for him, but to give him some insight that we cannot necessarily do. Now, the thing here, the most important part isn't it always about the asterisk, right? The asterisk is always the part we need to keep in mind. But in this case, the asterisk is a good thing. We don't need to know. Remember, we asked all those questions just a couple slides ago. Well, it could be this. It could be Aaron experienced trauma. It could be that Aaron's just uncomfortable. It could be because Corey's a loudmouth Eagles fan and he's just Aaron is very ready to connect with other people, but he's just not ready to connect with Corey, which is totally understandable. It could be any one of those things. It could be all of those things working together. We don't know. We don't need to know. I don't need to know that that Dr. Harris has experienced trauma in her past. I don't know that about Kim. So I'm using just an example here. I don't need to know that for me to go into talking with Kim and thinking about the environments that we're in, for me to think about like, how do I want to make sure that at the very least when Kim and I are talking, she feels safe and comfortable and respected and in control. I don't need to think, well, okay, this is one of these folks. I need to make sure they feel respected and in control and safe. We can do that. We can and should do that with everybody. We can and should be thinking about core motivators with everybody. We can and should be thinking about mentorship with everybody. So these, what we call universal responses, we don't need to know the answer to the puzzle to solve the puzzle nonetheless, right? And that's what I find some of the most promising aspects of these. And this is also when we talk about things like this being more of a mindset question than a specific tangible service question. Well, it very often is just this mindset of, I've got this toolbox here, and whatever tool I need, I'm going to find a way to apply it. Even if I don't know exactly how it works, I'm going to find a way to make this work for Aaron, for myself, for our apprenticeship, for our company, for our business. Again, all this moves right into empowering you. So that was just one example, but we kind of see how we can mix and match those strategies. Even when we don't know what the challenge is, we can mix and match those strategies to engage Aaron, and engaging Aaron, as we say, is the gateway to empowering him, to ensuring that he has control in this process of apprenticeship, this process of career development, and finally, of course, in this process of attaining and retaining and growing within his career. But we're gonna say goodbye to Aaron. He has been a good friend. We appreciate him. Now we're going to meet Sylvia, who is also pretty awesome. Sylvia is 18. She's just graduated from high school. Sylvia often contradicts her supervisor, Janet, who in turn is becoming somewhat frustrated by this. Janet, who is 48, assumes that Sylvia is distrustful. She's seeking to challenge her authority. Janet is looking at Sylvia's demeanor and her questions and thinking, okay, this is one of these folks who's trying to cause me problems, disrespecting me, not respecting my authority in this situation. And we see that automatic assumption of a sort of a need for defensiveness and like, okay, this is going to be an aggressive relationship. So we see this is already settling into clearly the two sides are not connecting the way they should, right? So this is where we're at with Sylvia. Again, she's brand new to this, just graduated from high school, and presumably trying to find her way in this new environment to some extent. Now, just as before, we had our biography. We know the facts about Sylvia. We know what we've observed so far, the tangible evidence, the data so far, right? Well, here's some speculation. These are possible challenges, possible causes that might be behind what we are observing in Sylvia's behavior. Sylvia may simply be unaware of the proper way to express concerns and new ideas, and how her perceived attitude is affecting others. She might just not know, again, 18 years old, just out of high school, might not know that the way you talk to a peer in high school is probably going to need to change a little bit when we're coming to work and talking to our supervisor, Janet. Sylvia may be insecure. It's clearly closely related to this first idea. Maybe she's overcompensating a bit. Maybe she feels, as many of us have in our experience, I'm sure we feel a little bit uncertain. So maybe we push a little harder. Maybe we push a little too hard to compensate because we feel like we are a little out of our depth. Sylvia may assume that her perspective as a young person is being dismissed and is therefore becoming more aggressive, becoming overly aggressive in her presentation. She might be thinking like, oh, clearly this my supervisor doesn't care at all about what I have to say here, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to be that much pushier because I feel disrespected in this situation, right? Here we come to this again. Sylvia may be experiencing trauma or another hidden disability, right? That trauma is not the only disability, but there might be a disability related to learning. And I do not speak from the perspective of a person with a disability when I say this, but I believe we can understand. Like, put yourself in a position where you feel like you just cannot absorb this new task. Of course, that creates frustration, particularly if we feel like we're not sure. Can I talk about that I have a different learning pattern? Can I mention that to my supervisor? Maybe I don't know the rules. Maybe I think I'll get fired if I say that I was diagnosed with a learning disability in high school. Who knows? But again, we can see how that could cause some frustration. Could also be mental health or emotionally related disabilities or trauma related disabilities. All of these things are possibilities. We do not know the answer. And of course, and I'll say right now, of course, we're not asking anyone in workforce development to become a mental health counselor. That's not the point. But we certainly need to think, well, this could be present in Sylvia's life. We don't know, could be. Finally, Sylvia may simply have realized too late that she's not as interested in this field or this job or this role or this workplace or this supervisor, Janet, or whatever it is. Maybe she's here now and she's thinking like, okay, this is not what I was envisioning. This is not what I wanted. I thought I did. Now I realize I don't. And I don't know. I'm 18 years old. What does someone do to respond to the fact that they suddenly feel like they're not in the right position that they thought they would be in? Again, these are possibilities, speculation that we're laying out here. So what are our possible responses for Sylvia? We could connect Sylvia with a mentor. And I mean, how long was that going to take, right? We wanted to put it right up front because we knew we were going to get to it. Might as well get it front and center, right here, right? So we could connect her with a mentor to discuss ways to get her message across while improving her relationships with her supervisor and colleagues. Just talk a little bit about it. Hey, these are the ropes. This is how things work around here. This is what's going on. Maybe we take some time to discuss Sylvia's interests and hobbies. Maybe we encourage Janet to do this as the supervisor. Maybe we have a situation where we can step in a little bit. Maybe we're not part of the employer. Obviously, we're in all kinds of different situations here. Ideally, we would want Janet, the supervisor, or maybe it's Janet, the instructor in the classroom. That doesn't really matter. We would want Janet to be doing this, trying to engage in these deeper questions and just get a sense of what are Sylvia's interests, hobbies, what are those motivating goals that she might have. Maybe we as staff can do this on the side and have this conversation as a way to, again, try to link those motivations to the right direction forward for Sylvia here. maybe we can role play with. Maybe we talk to Sylvia and Sylvia says, yeah, I can tell that my approach is not working. I know that my relationship with my supervisor isn't good. I don't know what to do. Maybe it's as simple as saying, okay, great. Let's just role play this. And we could even be silly. Sometimes I like to start by role playing as bad as it could possibly be. What's the worst version that Sylvia could possibly put forward? Get that out of our system and see in an almost humorous way, right? How, like, okay, this is as bad as you could be as an employee. This is as bad as your attitude could be. We'll go all the way over. What does the opposite of that look like? So it's, again, we're doing that for fun, but also to kind of give that counterbalance of if this is the worst response, well, then what's the opposite? What's the best possible response? More possible responses for our friend Sylvia. We could create a committee with Sylvia and other participants or employees. Again, we know folks are in different situations here, whether you're a registered apprenticeship and we've got participants, whether you're a community college with students, whether you're an employer with employees. Doesn't matter fundamentally that this same intervention would work. Maybe we create a committee that includes Sylvia and other folks to provide feedback to the employer or the organization. Just there, not to say, oh, this is terrible, oh, Janet's terrible, oh, I hate this. No, just say, hey, listen, Sylvia, we care about your opinion. You're part of the team now. You're part of the apprenticeship team or the employment team or the classroom team. You're part of the team. We need your perspective. We need to know how to do better. And you're the person who can tell us. Well, what is that? That's empowering. That's respectful. That's connective, right? That's going to take someone who feels like, you know what, they don't care what I think. So I'm going to come in fighting because I know I need to fight to be heard. No, we're going to say, you don't need to fight. Come on in. We want to hear from you. We want to empower you in this way. Let's make this work. And by the way, by doing this, we've, of course, set up yet another way that we actually can be learning about ourselves. We can be learning about our work, as Dr. Harris will be talking about shortly here in the next session, or excuse me, in the next segment of this session. Finally, we could connect Sylvia with an existing youth-oriented group if we have that in our employer or registered apprenticeship, or hey, maybe we can go beyond that and say, listen, Sylvia, we know that you're just out of high school, you're figuring this stuff out here. We'd like you to help us figure it out. And part of what that will mean is we're going to cut some time into your schedule here to give you the power and the time and the leverage, not a huge amount of time, but we're going to give you the chance to create this group because we know it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit every Sylvia that comes after you. Every Gen Z, Gen A, Gen Alpha person who comes after you is going to benefit from these as well. Again, with all of these, and probably I could go back, by the way, get all those possible things we were going to do with Aaron. I could put those in here too in the same exact way. We do not need to know for any of these solutions here. We don't need to know what the most core barrier or challenge is. All of these are beneficial interventions. All of these are worthwhile interventions that we can do almost as a matter of course. Now, something like setting up a group, that's a bigger thing. We know that, but we also know that it's a beneficial thing. Like maybe Sylvia came right in and everything is working swimmingly and everything's perfect. Still, great. Let's set up this group because we know that that's going to help our staff who identify in this way. That's also going to help us as an organization to be better because now we have this internal group with internal momentum and their whole job is helping us do our job better, helping us be a better employer, better educator, better registered apprenticeship sponsor, a staff person, what have you. That's what that group is there to do. So any of these things can be applied, can be beneficial without knowing anything about what the core challenges are. Which that then brings us around after that, but by no means inconsiderable chunk of time there that we spent talking about Aaron and Sylvia. But now we're gonna put the focus back on, again, how do we understand what is working? How do we understand how we keep getting better? And if you want to know how to keep getting better, you talk to Dr. Kimberly Harris because she's going to tell you how to do that. Kim, please.
Thank you so much, Corey. And you know what? That was a perfect layup, or if you will, I'm probably getting my sports analogies a little bit mixed up there. But to say that the examples that Corey shared with us, the examples, the pictures that he painted, are number one, a really great example of what of what we mean when we say that that this particular series, all of our series, are not meant to be an exhaustive, like one stop, this is everything about a particular challenge or goal or member of the workforce. And it's also too a perfect example of why it is important to understand the characteristics that define a particular segment of our community and potential workforce population. Both Aaron and Sylvia are representatives of the youth demographic, specifically Aaron being more of a Gen Zer, Sylvia being more of a Alpha Gen person, and with specific challenges and characteristics that are not uncommon to individuals that come from those particular generations. And the challenges that Corey shared, the pictures that he painted around trying to cultivate authentic relationship. Aaron with his particular point person or manager, and Sylvia with hers, are some of the challenges that we probably would anticipate that we might encounter. And that's another reason why such being taking a beat to be intentional and to think about what are some of the attributes, what are some of the characteristics that may not be exclusive to this particular category of potential members of our workforce, but may be very common among them, right? Which kind of clusters them together as a group. So when we think about then, being responsive to those things, and we think about some of the programs and some of the initiatives and some of the other supports that could help to address some of those things, mentorship, as Corey laid us up with that perfect reference, is definitely one of those things that we want to think about. But then we want to think, but like any support or tool or technique or aid, it is only as good as the time and effort and thoughtfulness that went into developing it in the right way. And once again, that is where evaluation comes into play. We've spent a lot of time talking about the overall importance of evaluation and its role in ensuring alignment between programmatic process, programmatic design, and the ultimate outcomes that we are looking to see. Right. And so we definitely know that evaluation, we should know by now that evaluation is a really amazing, tremendously great tool to help us with that from that end. We've also talked about the importance of ensuring that the goals that we articulate, the objectives that we articulate are clearly we operationalize them, if you will, in the right way, that we take a concept like engagement, or we take a concept like belonging, or we take a concept like fit, and we're able to define what does that mean for us in our particular workplace and space. So what we're going to talk about now briefly in this time is one element within the overarching evaluation process. So we've talked about the importance of evaluation, what should evaluation look like when done right, what an indicator does for us. Now we're going to talk about data collection and a little bit about that, and particularly as it pertains to the two examples that Corey shared with us around cultivating or making available a support such as a mentorship program for members of the Gen Z work population or the emerging Gen Alpha population. What does it mean to collect data, collect the right data, the data that is appropriate for answering the questions that you're looking to answer based upon the challenges, based upon the goals, based upon the objectives that you are looking to obtain, or the challenges that you're looking to lessen or even do away with if we're talking about challenges. So when we're thinking about collecting data as part of the evaluation process, thinking about providing program feedback to the participant before and after introducing a new intervention. I even want to take it a step, dial it back a step from that is how do we even develop the program feedback form? Thinking about the questions that should be on that form, thinking about the sourcing of those questions, hopefully in as much as possible, co-creating that feedback form so that we have what we call validity, right? When we are collecting that data analyzing that feedback, and then making decisions based upon that. So we need to make sure that we're mindful of that. Also, from the standpoint of emphasizing the value that you place on the participants' feedback, another reason why it's so important to engage stakeholders, to engage the folks who will be impacted by the questionnaire, the form, in its and the decisions, the policies, the actions that will be taken as a result of that. So to truly emphasize the value that you place on a participant's feedback, involve them in the co-creation of those forms, of those assessment measures, of those tools in as much as possible, right? Because we want means or ways of measuring, ways of assessing, relationships, dynamics, phenomena, processes, what have you, that are relevant to the contextual realities within that particular work environment. So, although a lot of times we know that time constraints are real, and that as we are trying to assess a situation and make the appropriate decisions based upon that assessment, we always don't have the time to create this comprehensive organic measurement tool from the ground up. But in as much as possible, we want to refine, tweak, and in some cases, totally, if it's possible and the resources are available, time being a resource, of course, fiscal resources, we want to, in as much as possible, involve stakeholders. In this case, team members, mentees, mentors, and other critical stakeholders in that creation process, right? Because we want to make sure that we're asking questions that are relevant to the realities of the job and the mentor-mentee relationship. We want to make sure that, terms that we are using are not terms that folks don't recognize. We want to make sure that things are not only timely and evergreen, but are really relevant and reflect the cadence, the language, the realities of those particular work in environments. So we also have to make sure that to do that, we go to the source of that information in as much as possible, that being that of the stakeholder. And a footnote that we have also is to don't conflate or confuse causation and correlation, right? We don't want to speculate on what caused something to happen, but we can clearly state what we see. And in subsequent and additional data collection, because data collection is never a one and done, we may be a little bit more confident in talking about or speaking to what degree or how confident we are or how assured we may feel that some things may be strongly correlated. But we definitely don't want to speak to causation straight out of the gate, right? Because so many things can impact what we see even after a program is off and running. So in the example that we lift up, being careful not to speculate on causality around a mentor-mentee relationship, let's say with Sylvia. We may want to say that Sylvia felt excited or recalled or responded that she was excited to come to work. But we don't want to say that, or we don't want to tout or lift up that Sylvia's excitement is because of her working or interaction with a mentor. We want to definitely, we would love it if that is the case. But we also want to make sure that before we make assertions like that, well, first of all, we don't want them to be assertions. We would want to be really confident in the statements that we make. And if it's truly causal, we would have, sufficient evidence to support that. But the main thing to be mindful of in this point along our journey in talking about the evaluation component and particular elements of that evaluation is that data collection is a huge key part of the evaluation process. And just like we want to make sure that there is an overall alignment between programmatic development and process and then the outcomes, we know that data collection is a key element in ensuring that that happens. So we will rely upon, and we should always be working to find ways to identify opportunities of incorporating stakeholder voice, not just in the feedback that they offer, right, but in the development of the tools that will assess and measure that feedback. So we want to definitely make sure that as we are together along the course of these future webinars, that you keep that in mind. We're going to build upon that and think about, contemplate, visit other elements of the evaluation process, and think about the totality of it and how it all serves to get us closer to better alignment with the outcomes that we seek and the processes that we implement and employ. And with that in mind, as always, we're super excited to be having this conversation with you. Please feel free to reach out to us with any comments, curiosities, and always be sure to check out the newsletter that we have. And we look forward to having this conversation with you over the next couple of webinars in this particular series. And with that, we wish you a good day.